Welcome to the Bullseye Breakdown, the podcast where CEOs, founders, and leaders of industry break down big decisions, big wins, and big lessons. No fluff, just real talk. Let's get into it. This is the Bullseye Breakdown. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode. We have the distinct pleasure of hosting Michael Lindsey, the CEO of Lindsey's Office Furniture. Since 1987, Lindsey Office Furniture has been a cornerstone in providing top-of-the-line office furnishings to businesses in and around Houston, Texas. With one of the largest inventories in the nation, they've been instrumental in transforming workspaces to enhance productivity and aesthetics. Under Michael's visionary leadership, the company continues to set industry standards, ensuring businesses have access to quality, new and used refurbished office furniture. Join us as we delve into Michael's journey, the evolution of office furnishings, and the future of workplace design. Michael Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that intro.
Yeah,
it's a cool industry to be in. I'm excited to talk to you today and looking forward to maybe learning some stuff from you and maybe just sharing a few insights about how we got to where we're at.
I would love to think that I could share some insights with you, because I'll tell you, as the listeners, I've had the luxury of knowing Michael for almost a year and a half now, I guess it looks like. Y'all are in for a treat because he really has such an amazing business mind. I'm excited to hear a little bit about how he thinks and what makes him tick as he's gone through challenges with his company and where it's gone and where it's headed. And I think he brings a lot to the table for us to understand what it takes to be a CEO and what it takes to work through those day-to-day challenges and how best to look at the scalability and the growth of a company over time. With that, what I'd really love to do, Michael, is just take a minute and tell me about your journey up to this point. Tell me about Lindsey Office Furniture. Tell me about where you come from and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I started in this industry a long time ago. My dad actually started this business in 1987. He was a nobody. I mean, he was working for my grandfather at the time, owned an office furniture company in Houston called Scott & Associates. That was my mom's father. And then when my dad married my mom, my dad went to work for my grandpa, making $6 an hour just in the warehouse. My dad wasn't like the best of guys back then. He was pretty rough dude. My mom cleaned houses. We were, a very, very low class family, lived in apartments and, we didn't have any money at all. But my dad learned the business. He figured out that, if you can buy office furniture real cheap and resell it for decent money, you can make a little money. And so that's what he did. He just started selling used furniture. 1987, it was very, very easy to find used office furniture because in Houston, the banking industry had just collapsed because of the oil and gas industry. And so all of these banks were going out of business and they were just giving away the furniture. My dad could literally just go pick up office furniture and then go find someone to buy it and for any amount of money, $5. He made $5 because
pure profit.
It was free. Yeah, everything was free. And so he basically just opened up a little bitty store. It used to be an old Hilo Auto Parts that was run out of it. And the old man that owned the building, my dad just drove by, saw him standing out there putting a for lease sign up and, walked up to him and basically said, "Hey, would you lease me this building for this much money? I need 6 months free rent to get my business up and running." And the guy was like, "That's sitting here empty anyway." Sure. So he filled it up with used office furniture and it started. And that's how the company got started in 1987.
Isn't that so funny that, first of all, that's like a scene right out of a movie. He's just putting up a for lease sign. It just happens to be there putting up a for lease sign. I think I've seen that. And Michael Keaton plays the role of some aspect of that. But asking the question of "Hey, I want this building. Can you do it?"
Yeah.
And
and basically telling him this is what I have to have. I have to have 6 months free rent or I'm not going to be able to do it. And then hopefully in 6 months I'll be able to pay you. And the guy was like, the building's empty. I'm not going to lease it for 6 months anyway. Yeah, sure. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? And so, fast forward, 38 years later, and here we are. So that's how we started the company. I kind of entered the company. I've worked inside the business since I was a kid, on the weekends coming up and just always been around it, always been intrigued by it. Nothing that I wanted to do, though. And then, outside of high school, I started, a different business and kind of did that for a little while and, basically went to my dad and was like, "Hey, I wouldn't mind coming and working for you." And because I've worked for you through high school and, things like that. And he basically said, okay. And I had already done almost every job in the company from refinishing desk to delivery to sales to loading trucks to just anything and everything. As a kid of a CEO, of a small business owner, that's what you do. You just do all the jobs that nobody else wants to do and you don't get paid for it. So I did that for a long time. And then kind of once I, graduated high school, I actually started getting paid for it. I think I started at $10 an hour, something like that, which was actually pretty good money for an 18-year-old, right out of high school. Or actually I was probably 19, 20 when that happened because I had the landscape company for a little bit. I just started with the business and then I got really intrigued. And one of the things that I've always been is curious about stuff. And so I keep asking the question why all the time to everyone. And I would just always ask my dad, why? Why do we do it this way? Why are we doing this? Why? And I'd be like, God, you ask so many questions. And it's like, well,
You sound like my daughter.
Yeah, well, I want to know what's going on. And I want
Right.
to know the reasons why. And if you don't have a reason, well, maybe we can figure out a better why.
Exactly.
Or a better way. And so that's how I've been my whole life. And, I would jump into the delivery side of the business and be like, well, why do we do this? And why do we use key maps when there's GPS? Why do we, and just keep asking the question and then, just slowly change things. And then you look back after 3 years and you're like, well, I only changed little bitty things. But then you look back after a 3-year period of just doing small little things and you're like, oh, well, we got a lot accomplished. And, I didn't go to college. I didn't have a formal education and running a company or anything like that, but I just had hands-on experience with my dad, seeing how he did things, listening to his stories, seeing the stress, seeing the anxiousness, seeing the failures, seeing the success, and seeing how all of these things are always connected. Success is always connected to failure. And failure's always connected to success. It's just how far are you willing to go to get that connection? A lot of people fail and they just don't keep going and they don't connect the next success to those failures. Failure is 100% a product. You have to have it. You have to have failures in order to have success. Being young and being able to see all of these failures, but see how they stacked up and then eventually created success just allowed me to fail more. Honestly, it just allowed me the benefit of failure, which is a huge, huge thing. Most people don't ever learn that lesson, that failure is the key. It's the key to any success is failure. You're never good at something the first time you do it, but if you keep doing it and you keep failing at it and you keep learning from it, you'll get really, really good. And it doesn't really take that long to do it. And so that's what I did. I just kept failing. My dad was extremely good in letting me make decisions and letting me fail. So I get in the business. I start to change a lot of things. We come to the, up to the, the 21st century. We have a website now. We're using accounting softwares. We're actually hiring people to do jobs instead of just throwing people at things. We're putting job descriptions out. We're having meetings. And we're just pretty much coming from like just a mom and pop shop to a small business. To a real small business. And so that's kind of how I got started in the business and kind of how it all progressed to where it is now. And then, 18, I decided I would say, the business needs a new CEO. My dad, much older and he was very risk adverse, and you can't be that way as a CEO of a company. You have to take risks. You have to take calculated risk, but you have to be willing to fail. And, if you're not willing to do that, then your company's just going to not go anywhere. And so he stepped aside, allowed me to buy the business. And that was a couple of years ago now. And I've had the reins since then. And we're back on a very strong growth mode and a strong scaling mode. And that's kind of how I got here.
You're humble by saying you're a small business. Comparatively to Coke, you might be a small business, but you're not a small business. You got some things working over there, buddy. And it is really interesting to see the methodology in which they have taken in that short term of Michael being the CEO and moving down into the technology-driven, data-forward modeling of how to connect with clients and customers and future customers. It's only on an up and to the right trajectory. It's moving forward, and it's moving forward fast, which I'm happy to see. So it's amazing to see across when you have the ability to watch a company grow throughout your life. It is crazy how many times you can look back at what you were just talking about and small changes over time and what that does, right? Both my parents were entrepreneurs as well. My mom had a grounds maintenance company in New Mexico, where she was one of the first female grounds maintenance company owners in a very male-driven market, and she sold it to True Green. And when I was a senior in high school, I was one of the largest privately owned grounds maintenance companies in the Southwest. So being able to be around something like that and seeing an entrepreneur at work, first of all, I think it instills the entrepreneur fire in your children, right? And we talk about kids, we talk about having kids and being around those kids, and they see that you're working and they're seeing that you're failing, and they see that it's okay to fail. And so you're instilling those moments from day one in kids, and those kids will then have the fire and move up. But being able to actually witness that firsthand, I think, is so key in being able to then run your own company, whether it be your family business or one that you start aside from that, because you have a different perspective than somebody that's just like, man, I've worked for somebody all my life and I want to go start a franchise, or I want to go do this or that. How is that giving you a leg up against competition by being able to have been in the business for 30 some odd years?
Yeah, I don't stagnate on decisions, right? Because I realize that I'm going to make some bad ones. It's just part of the game. You know, you try to get enough data to make a decent decision, but you can't let it paralyze you. The data can't paralyze you. You have to understand that quick, decent decisions are better than slow, perfect decisions, because there's no such thing as a perfect decision. So one of the things that I've tried to do over the last 2 years is start to make faster decisions. The faster you make a decision, honestly, the worse the decision can be, right? Because you're rushing through things. But if you can create a process by which you can start to develop a habit of creating quick decisions and have a process that you do these, that you make these decisions with, and you do it that way every single time, it can speed it up. Because a lot of times just the speed at which you can do things eliminates a lot of the issues that pop up. Because if you're quick enough, you can get in front of them as you see them. But if you keep delaying and you keep delaying and you keep trying to work on it until it's perfect, it's never going to get there. So what I try to do is I try to say, okay, how much of this data do I actually need to make this decision? Is it 50% of the data? Is it 70% of the data? Some things are a little bit different. Where would I feel comfortable making this decision? At what level? Because I'm never going to get 100%, right? So I have to figure out things that I know more about, that I've made decisions in the past on. I might only need 40% of the information, right? Because I've got some experience in making that type of quick decision. And then on other things that I maybe haven't made that decision, like for example, buying a piece of dirt, to expand the business. If I've never made that decision before, then I tell myself, okay, I might need 75 or 85% of the data in order to make that decision. But at least I have an understanding of how much data that I really want before I have to make pull that trigger. And in some things it's a little less, and in some things it's a little more. It just depends on my level of experience in that realm of decision making, right? But the faster that I can speed those things up, and the more that I can do them. So if I make the decision, if I get 75% of the data on the real estate transaction, like buying a piece of dirt, and I make that decision, the next time that pops up, I won't need 75% of the data, because I would have already known, okay, some of these things actually didn't matter, right? Because now I've gone through that before. The center point energy thing that I looked up to see if we could get power to that space didn't matter, because what I learned in buying it the first time was that it doesn't matter where it's at. Center point will always come to you because they want that. I didn't know that before, so I got that data to see what it was. Well, now I don't need that data on the next one, right? That's a perfect example of something that I might have needed initially on the first time I've ever made that decision, but I don't need it again because I learned something doing that first decision. And if I can start getting that data down to where I only need 50% or 40% or 30% of the data in order for me to make a quick decision, my decisions will be much faster and they'll be much more accurate. And I can just do it over and over and over and over again. If you've never hired a CEO for your company, you need to get all the data you can, right, in order to do that. If this is your 7th time hiring a CEO, you probably what kind of CEO works for your company and what doesn't. You don't need all the data anymore. You can make a much faster decision. So it's all about learning as you're moving along, but making sure that as you're learning, these decisions are starting to speed up. Because the quicker you can get to them, the quicker you can push them out of your brain and into reality, the more data you can get, and the better you can become at these things. And so that, for me, the speed at which you can develop an answer or a strategy or a solution or make a decision, that's key. It's got to be quick.
Yeah. And I think, an interesting caveat there too is you talked about, a quick decision is better than a perfect decision. And ultimately, depending better than a slow, perfect decision. Correct. A fast, quick decision is better than a slow, perfect decision, because when you start looking at that data and you start ruminating on all that and you just have it going through your head, you get analysis paralysis and then something gets pushed out over time. And it's important to know, because depending on what that decision that you're making is, you can iterate off of a lot of this stuff too. And unless we talk about A and B decisions a lot, whether or not like how easy it is to walk it back or change it or iterate off of it. I mean, buying a piece of property is a little bit more difficult, but if you are implementing a new SOP, don't wait for that SOP to be perfect before you push it out to your sales team, because right now they're flying blind and any sort of advancement is going to be better, and you can iterate off that downstream, right?
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and especially I like to, on the SOP strategy there, I like to start SOPs extremely benign. Just the initial SOP, whatever it is, it's so benign. And then over time, you grow those into what you really want them to be. The problem is that if you start with 0 standard operating procedure, which most mom and pop shops and most small businesses don't really have a way that they do things every single time. But if you just start and it's extremely cumbersome, your staff is just never going to do it. It's never going to get done right. It's never going to get done properly, and it's never going to get done on time. So what we try to do is when we have a new idea about how we want to do things or a process by which, we start with the most basic, benign way to track it and to look at it. And then we just grow it over time, because you can't just change something overnight and expect it to be 100%. You've got to do these things in the way that humans do things.
Yeah.
Just over time. We don't just download a program and all of a sudden we know exactly what we're doing. It takes a little bit, and you've got to give grace during these transitions. And I think that's one thing that the CEOs don't do a very good job at, is because just because it's good to you and you've understood it, right? You might have been thinking about this for 6-8 months, and then you implement it, and then overnight you expect your employees to get it, which is taking you 6 months to get. So yeah, now there should be a much shorter time period, because you should be able to communicate very, very well on how you want things done, and you should be flushing these problems out as they come up. But you still have to give some time, especially on SOPs, to make sure that they're done right, and start them simple and then grow them over time. That's how I approach those things.
And, I think every CEO has the idea of wanting to implement some sort of SOPs, and you need to, and to your point, if you don't do it as you are establishing whatever that process is, or if you're establishing the company, you need to get on that as quickly as possible, because as you grow and scale and you have more people coming on, it will never, ever be easier than at the beginning of whatever the implementation is. And then trying to get people to change their ways downstream specifically. And you're actually giving me some insight here, because in past life, when I've tried to implement, large scale SOPs across grander systems, people of 100 or more, it's like pulling teeth. And to your point, I've always been extremely detailed about the SOP, thinking that, all right, cool, I'm going to have a step-by-step instruction of exactly what you need to do. Well, if people don't do it that way and they don't think that that is the right way to do it, then it may not be the best way. There's another side of that, though, too, because you think it's the best way to do that, and you think that it's going to be the most important and most efficient way to get the process done. But if you're not doing it every day, you probably don't know the most efficient and cost-effective way to get these processes done. And so when you are pushing something out that's telling an employee how to do their job, and they read it and they know they have a better way to do it, you're killing your culture, you're killing their motivation, you're killing any sort of acceptance level that you have there. By going about it the way that you just described, it's genius, because you can slowly implement it into the workforce. You can get buy-in from people quickly. You can take advice of things that you maybe didn't see, because look, we always can say that we know what's best for our companies, but that's not entirely true. We have to trust our employees to be able to tell us when we don't know something, because we're not perfect. We're humans. So I think going about it that way is genius, because you can implement in a method that is going to have a group buy-in and have a group dynamic where everybody is trying to pitch in to make the system work better. And so I think that's super.
And I think communicating that up front is key, right? We are going to start this SOP. It's going to be extremely simple and easy at first. And as we go along, we're going to get input from all of you guys to figure out what is the best way to actually do this. And we're going to slowly implement this over the next 6 to 8 weeks, right? So that's just the initial conversation. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is why we think that we need an SOP here, because we're having these issues. We want to eliminate these issues. And so this is how we're going to start. It's going to start extremely simply. We're just going to start tracking this thing. Maybe that's how you start. All we're going to do right now is we're just start tracking, right? And then every week we're going to sit down and we're going to come up with one way together that we think that we can, work on this together and come up with the first part of this SOP. And let's start doing that. Let's do it together. Let's make sure that it's the right thing. And then next week we'll meet again. And then over a 6-week period, you've just built out the entire SOP. You have 100% buy-in because it's their ideas. All you're telling them is like, look, we have to do this because this is an issue. How do we do this? You have a team for a reason, right? All of the answers don't have to come out of the CEO's brain, but all of the problems have to be looked at by the CEO. But you don't have to come up with all the solutions, right? You just have to acknowledge the problem, and then your team, you can acknowledge it to them. This is a problem that we have. We need to create this type of solution. Let's create it together. We're going to slowly implement it over the next 6 weeks. But at this 6-week period, we need to have this SOP finalized and done. We're going to do it as a team. It's the easiest way because it combines everybody into that process. Everybody gets their 2 cents. Everybody gets the buy-in, and it's not this top-down push. It's this center-out acceptance.
Community involvement, group kind of mentality of it's gung-ho is what it is, right? So in having...
And back to your point, even if you're starting from scratch, right, you're going to write this SOP, and even if you're the only single employee, you're going to have to do it. And if you do it, and then once you've done it 3 or 4 times, you're like, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. You have to tweak these things, right? And that's why quick decisions are better than perfect decisions, because even if you made the perfect decision and it took you 6 weeks to do it, it's going to change. Because once you start to actually use it and you have more context coming at you from all the different data points that you're getting, you need to change it, right? It should change. It should, and as you grow the business, it should change. There, if you only have one person and that's an SOP, and now you've just grown to 22 people, well, guess what? That SOP is going to have to change. And so these aren't written in stone, and they should be looked at frequently. And they should be thought about on an ongoing basis, because if you want to stay efficient as you grow, the SOPs have to change to be more efficient with your new level of success.
Technology question. Have you used Scribe at all to adjust your SOPs?
No, I have not.
So check.
To be fully transparent, I mean, we are still in the process of working on this. I mean,
you should be.
We had a business that was run by, an older, gentleman, my dad, who was just like, we'll just get it done. Right? There doesn't need to be a process. I'll just force it, top down force. And I don't want to work that way. I want to be able to go on vacation and not have to tell everybody what to do every single day. They should know what they need to do. And so we're slowly building these out. But, we tried it initially top down. This is how we're going to do things. And guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. So you learn. And now I know, okay, now I can't do that. So we've got to figure out a way to do this. And so we started slow. And guess what? It works. You just take a little bitty bite at a time, and then you look back after 2 years, and you're like, oh, we got it all done. Great.
You know how you eat an elephant?
Just one little bite at a time.
One tiny bite at a time.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I think it would have been a ton easier for us to just shut the company down, open it back up with all new SOPs, but we didn't have that option, so we had to do it the way that worked best for us. Maybe your company can do it top-down force, but it's just never worked for me. And so if I keep doing it that way, that's literally the definition of insanity. Just trying to do the same thing over and over and get a different result. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you say that. Maybe your company can do it. I mean, that just scares me. My team I respect every opinion of everyone on my team so immensely. The reason why I hired everyone that is on my team is because they can do what they do better than I can do it. And as a CEO, you have to appreciate that, especially from an upper management, C-suite sort of lens. But when you look at everybody else and, they are value. And so I've never been in a company where top down push, force, make it happen is ever going to work. It's like leadership by fear. That doesn't work.
It hasn't worked for me. I wouldn't say that it hasn't worked for everyone, because I know a couple of companies that are super successful that are run that way, but it just doesn't work for me. I don't want to micromanage. I don't like micromanaging. I want to hire people that are really, really good at what they do and let them do their job. So, I'm just a leader. I'm just leading them. I'm trying to keep, I'm just making sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. We don't even have to be in the same boat. right? But as long as we're all rowing in the same direction, trying to get to the same spot, that's all that matters to me. You literally don't need to be in the same boat. And I completely agree with that. Just like a tugboat. You can have a tugboat help you, and I feel that as long as we're rowing in the right direction, that's all that matters. So.
Oh, for sure. Let me ask you something. I want to talk to you a little bit about just business over the course of the past 5 years. I guess it's more than that. It's almost 8 years that you've been running it. Yeah.
Well, I've been CEO for that long. I've been owner since 2021, or 100% owner. I was 27% owner prior to that.
Well, let's talk about that time kind of coming through and building up to where you are today. What do you think has been the hardest decision that you've had to make throughout this whole process? Like, if you can look at one thing that you're like, man, that was tough.
I think it's internal. I think it was understanding that I'm enough to run this company. Like, had this idea, because I didn't go to college. I'm not formally educated in any way. I read a lot of books and I try to inform myself as much as I can that way. Making sure that I understood what it takes to be a CEO. And then after you understand it, to make the decision that says, actually want to do this. That was one of the hardest decisions, because honestly, to run and own a company, it is not for the weak. It is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life by any measure, and by multiples of the next thing in line. Second guess yourself every single day. You don't know if you're making the right decisions. You hope that you trust the people that are around you to do what it is not for the weak of heart. So that was probably the one decision, like, for me, to make sure that I really, really wanted to be CEO. And then the next biggest decision past that was anytime we hire anyone, right? I honestly think that the most important decision that you make as a CEO are the leaders that you put in your company. And so to me, those have been the very, very hardest decisions I've made, is the leadership decisions. And I haven't made excellent leadership decisions yet. I think I've made one good one, but I haven't had to do it many times, so I'm not good at it yet. And I know that I'm going to fail in hiring these people, but eventually I think I'll get really, really good at hiring leaders. So that's really what I'm working on right now, is hiring leadership and training myself and with enough knowledge to be able to do it properly. I think, maybe that's not the direct answer to your question, but every time that I try to hire a leader, it becomes one of the biggest decisions I make, and one of the hardest decisions that I have to make.
I think there's a perfect answer to the question, honestly, because when you're looking at it, like, you're putting so much weight and trust into this individual that you're bringing onto the team, and you're hoping that they're going to meld well. You hope that they're going to get your vision. You hope that their work ethic is going to be on level of yours. And if it doesn't work, you're the only one that has to answer. And then if they walk away, then you have to take on their responsibilities again until you can find somebody to get them back. And so I can see how that would be scary.
Yeah. So you know how I am with books.
Yeah.
So one of the books that I'm reading right now, that I just finished up and I'm going to reread it, is called Who. And it is a book on how to hire leaders and on how to hire people in general and how to interview people. And so when I have problems or I have things that I don't know what I'm doing, I just immerse myself in trying to be knowledgeable about those things. Again, I don't have an educated background, right? I barely got out of high school. And when I mean barely, I mean barely got out of high school. And not because I was dumb, it's just because I didn't go. I just didn't go. I just skipped class. I just never went. I graduated early because I went to the counselor and I was like, I'm just not coming back. So if I have enough credits, you can graduate me. But if not, I'm just never coming back. And she was like, actually, you have enough credits and we'll just graduate you. I graduated. Never went to prom, never went to none of those things, because I just wasn't.
You never went to prom?
No.
Man, you missed so much.
So it just wasn't for me. School just wasn't for me. I didn't have a good time. I didn't understand much that was going on. It just didn't do much for me.
Well, it's probably because you weren't being challenged. I've had many opportunities to talk to you, and it's evident to me that you are brilliant. So you tell me that, and you didn't go to college, you didn't go to this, but I mean, it's not for lack of anything other than the fact that your mind was probably already 5 steps ahead of everything else in that situation.
Yeah, my brain definitely wasn't inside the school. My body was, but my brain definitely was not inside the school. Yeah, so that's absolutely true.
And I just got done reading The Hard Thing About Hard Things with by Ben Horowitz, and he actually has a section in there talking about executive levels and what to do, and then also he talks about firing executive level employees. And that's a question that I want to pull on your thread for in that fear, because a lot of that is not necessarily like, well, hey, did I do a good job? It's, hey, what if I didn't do a good job? How do you figure out the churn there, and what do you have to do? Like, because it automatically starts the process again, and hiring an executive is not easy nor cheap. So when you're working through all that, my question is, how long do you let it run before you pull the ripcord?
Well,
And just say,
I think it starts at the interview process, right? I think if the person that you're hiring doesn't know exactly, and I mean exactly, how you measure their success, how can they be successful for you? Not just you do this and you're successful, but how I, as the CEO of the company, am going to measure that. And if you don't have those measurables, or KPIs, as they're known in the world of Jim Collins, you can't hold anybody accountable. So you can't fire anybody. And that's the biggest mistake I think that people make when hiring someone, is they don't physically show them or tell them exactly what they expect out of them, and exactly how I'm going to measure your success. And even when they do that, a lot of times they tell the person, I'm going to measure your success this way, for a salesperson, through revenue. But what they actually mean is, no, I'm not going to measure your success through revenue, because even a blind squirrel can find a nut every once in a while. What they really mean is the things that you have to do in order to have the consequence of positive revenue. So the phone calls that you have to make, the emails that you have to make, the relationships that you have to build, the referral partners that you have to introduce yourself to, all of those things, right? If you're talking about a salesperson, if you're talking about an executive, it's going to be something totally different. But you have to show them and tell them, this is exactly what I expect out of you, and this is exactly how I'm going to measure if you're doing those things or not. And then it's just a simple conversation, right? You have the data in front of you. You either did it or you didn't do it. If you didn't do it multiple times, you're gone. It's just that simple. It makes it so much more easily, because it's like, look, bro, I told you this is what you have to do. Sis, this is what I told you have to do. You didn't do it. You're gone.
roadmap.
This is exactly how I am going to measure your success. You knew it when I hired you. So how long do you need to measure someone's success?
And that's a very good point. Ultimately, from a standpoint, I think that there is a little bit of some gray area there, to where you look at it and, like, you know, some people might need a little bit longer of a runway than others to ramp up.
Nope,
You're done.
no, because you're going to tell me in the first month, what are you doing? What are you doing this month? What do you need to do this month in order for you to be successful? Well, if you're the VP of sales, well, I need to have lunch with every one of my salespeople. I need to look at our sales playbook. I need to familiarize myself with it. I need to do these other three things. Okay, great. That's how I'm going to measure your success this month. And then when you meet with them next month, if they didn't do all of those things, you know exactly who you have. They told you what they needed to do, and then they didn't do it, or they did it. It's literally that simple.
Well, yeah, and I think that caveat, when you're asking them once they're coming on board, that they're giving you what their expectations are, and if they're not hitting their own expectations, then yeah.
Or it's you. It's like, I think you need to do this. I think you need to have lunch with every salesperson. I think you need to read the sales manual. I think you need to do this. I think you need to do that. And once you do all of those things, then you can have the context from which we can figure out exactly how we move forward. But you have to have these conversations. You can't let someone be undirected. They'll just walk around in circles. They won't do anything. They won't get anything done. You have to be very specific. This is what I'm hoping to get from you. This is how I'm going to measure if you're successful or not. Period. End of story.
Yeah. Well, you know, and there's a flip side to that too, from the interviewee's perspective, and something as like when I'm interviewing a potential hires, I look at whether or not they're asking the high performer question, right? So what you are saying is that you are giving them exactly what they need to be a high performer, whether they're being sales, executive, you know, if it's the person refinishing the desks, whatever it is, you are laying out what the high performer quota is to them. But I think that as an interviewee, when you look at somebody across the table and they ask you what you expect, and if you are not providing that, then that's someone that you key into immediately, because they are looking to see how they can fit themselves into that high performer status. If they're already thinking online with what you are, then odds are they're probably going to be, you know, not someone that you have to let go of. But I just think that that's an interesting way of going about it. Like, if you're laying out the information and nobody's asking any questions about it, okay, fine. But if you are laying out the information and someone says, okay, well, what happens if I do better than this, right? And they're automatically thinking track record higher than what your expectations are. They can still falter and not make it. But, you know, in the hiring process itself, like looking at how, you know, someone may pan out, it's an easy signifier to me.
Yeah. Well, and right on that same vein, how you interview them makes a huge difference, right? You have to be purposeful with these interviews. You have to have intent. You can't sit there and talk about how the guy went skydiving for 30 minutes. And that's what normally happens, right? That's normally what happens is when you interview someone, you start a conversation because we're human. We like conversation. And then you get onto a topic and you'll look at his resume and you'll be like, oh, it says here you skydive. Most people that interview would talk about that because it's something that you don't see on a resume very often, right? Well, you might waste 45 minutes talking to this guy about skydiving when it has nothing to do with what you're talking about, you know? So you need a process for how you interview these people, and you need to call references. You need to do, you have to do all of the things that you're supposed to do. And that's what I love about the book Who is it formalizes it for you. It lays it out for you. This is step 1. This is step 2. This is step 3. This is step 4. All the way through. This is exactly how you do this. And this is the scientific reason why you do it this way, right? And that's why I love that book, is because it tells you this is why we're doing it. This isn't just what we do, but this is exactly why we do it. And so it teaches you the reasons behind how to interview, you know, someone. And if you can implement those things and you can do them correctly, you can start to hire A players. And then those A players will beget more A players, because people that are A players only want to work with other A players. Once you get to that top level, people at that level, like me and you, we don't deal with the BS. We don't want to deal with a level below us. It's like either get on my level or get out of my way. But the B and the C players will let anyone work with them. A players, once you get an A player, you better start hiring other A players, because if you don't, they're gone. They only want to work around other A players.
And they deserve that. Yeah, they've got to the point in their career and whatever they're doing or however they're doing it, that they have got their shit together. They're working in a process that is allowing them to be that top performer of whatever it is that they're doing. And to your point, they have earned the right to be like, that person is not somebody I want to work with.
And if you're not an A player CEO, you had better become one real quick, or you'll lose that person.
Yeah. Which I like, you know, when I look at people that I try and bring to the table to work on my team, I like people that challenge me a little bit, you know, much like you have worked in your business for years and years and years. Everything that I do, I have also done. Like everything that my company encompasses, I know how to do on a higher than proficient level in most cases. And the key is, like, when you bring in that A player, they're going to drive you to be a better person, because we need to be learning and doing better on a day-to-day basis. And that's why you read books. That's why I read books. That's why we're constant. That's why I have this podcast. I literally have this podcast so I can talk to people like you and be like, what am I doing wrong in my life, in my business, and how can I be better?
Iron sharpens iron, man.
Yeah, dude.
Absolutely does. If you can get one A player is worth 25 B.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
crazy.
It is crazy, and they're very hard to find.
I'll let you know if I see any. Okay.
No, you won't. Hire them.
Probably. Well, let me ask you, in continuing in this vein, I guess, like, what is, over the course of your experience, what's been maybe one of the hardest leadership challenges that you've had to go through?
Holding people accountable. It's still hard. I mean, it's still one of the hardest things, because people are people, right? I mean, there's a lot of times I look at people and I'm like, yeah, I would have done that too. You know, you got to give grace. I mean, you have to understand that humans are still humans. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to be lazy. Even A players have off days, you know. That's probably one of the biggest leadership, you know, hurdles, is to give people a little bit more grace. As a CEO, you know, timelines are very, very short for us, because we want things done tomorrow, you know, or yesterday. And so just being able to know that, hey, just because I make really, really quick decisions and things like that, it doesn't mean that the process for how these decisions get implemented is real quick, right? Even though it's like I told you, I can make a quick decision on the SOP, but it's going to take 6 weeks to implement it. Right? I mean, I can make the decision fast, but you have to give your people some time, you know, to work through these things. I work through things extremely quickly in my brain because I don't ever stop thinking about it. So I'm at dinner with my kids, and I'm at, you know, at the ball game with my wife. It's always on my brain. So I get be able to work through things much quicker because it's my life. My name's on the daggum building. I better be thinking about this stuff.
Well, exactly. Your employees are not. They're not on there.
And they shouldn't. I don't expect them to either. When they're here, they need to, right? They need to step up and be here and be present. And I'm paying them to be here and do their job. They need to be thinking about those things when they're here. But I get it. I'm not expecting them to work through things as quickly as I do. So you have to give them that grace, and you have to hold them accountable. You have to, if you say, hey, when do you think you can get this done by? And they say March 31st, and March 31st comes and goes, and they're not done. You got to say something.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of a ramification.
Yeah, holding people accountable has been very, very tough for me. For some people, it's extremely easy. It's just I seem to have more empathy towards my staff in a lot of situations, trying to make myself hold people accountable, but still understanding that I love these people, right? I mean, I truly do. I spend more time with these people than almost anybody in my life. So holding them accountable is probably the toughest thing. But the way I'm able to get through it is communication. Right? You just talk to them about it and you tell them, this is exactly what I expect. And this is exactly how I'm going to measure your success. Are you okay with that? And if they're not okay with it, then we need to have a conversation about why aren't you okay with me holding you accountable? Because if you're not, then, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that who we are isn't who you are. And you need to find your happy place. It's just not here. It's just not going to be with us because we are going to hold you accountable.
It goes back to your boat analogy. Like everybody needs to be rowing for the same island.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good segue into what that island is. I think you can make the analogy of scaling against that, right? You're rowing towards the better business. So let's talk about scaling for a second. You've been kind of up and down, in and out. COVID hit you guys kind of hard a little bit, and you had to do some constricting. What's your outlook on scaling right now, and what is your thought process in terms of trying to grow the business?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20. When we went through COVID and we lost, 80% of our revenue overnight, right? Just dumped, 80% gone overnight. It was the worst thing that in the world that could have ever happened to us. Hindsight, it's one of the best things that could have absolutely happened to us. We were not foundationally ready to scale our business. We were a big business, compared to where we went during COVID. And then, but we now know that we were maxed out. We were never going to be any larger revenue or profitability wise than what we were, because we had maxed out what that foundation of that business could carry. Right? We built a one-story building on that foundation, and that's all it could carry for the company. And so what happened was, by minimizing our business and losing 80%, we almost got to start over. Right? Like I told you, it would have been nice to start over. Well, we almost had to.
And your SOPs then, Mike.
We were almost forced. Unfortunately, I didn't hold 100% of the keys to the kingdom at that point, so I couldn't do a ton. But we started, right? We at least realized we had this opportunity, right? Or I did. And so then once I bought the business, we had grown some, we had come kind of a little bit out of COVID, from 2020 to 2021. I bought the business in late 2021. But I was able at that point to be like, okay, I can stabilize. Fortunately, we were in a position to where we weren't profitable. We were losing about $200,000 a month because our expenses were still at the level of the business that we were, but our revenue had dropped 80%. So the first thing that I had to do in late 2021 was stabilize. We went from losing $250,000 roughly a month to, it took us about 18 months, but we got to zero. Right? So we got to break even. And that was the key for us, is just getting back to that break even point. Now, a lot of that was cutting expenses, but a lot of that was also the growth of the revenue, right? Because we're coming out of COVID. We went from, these are very rough numbers. We went from, 14 million all the way, down to 3.5. And then slowly through 2021, 4.5, 5.5. So, we're back on the climb, going back up. And this year we'll be, back up to pre-COVID level. But during that time period, I just saw the opportunity, and I was like, this is the time to do this. And so one of the very, very first things that we had to do was we had to change our accounting software, because we were still run as a very, very small business, mom and pop, just enough to get to not in trouble with the government.
Basically. Be knocking QuickBooks.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? We went through a whole thing looking at Oracle, NetSuite, the whole
Yeah.
9 yards. We went back to QuickBooks.
Did you really?
We sure did. After we talked to our CPA, our new CFO, all of these things, we actually looked at their programs. We're utilizing one of their top tier programs, and then we're utilizing some of their API to attach some software stuff to. But it works great for us now. And so that was our first kind of, but what we had to do is we had to build the foundation, right? We had to set these big giant pillars in place. That way we could build a 20-story building on top of it, because we never had the foundation set. And so over the last 2.5 years, that's what we've been doing. SOPs, getting our process procedures down pat, getting our accounting down pat, understanding value of money for our business, understanding our inventory turnover, understanding all of these things that we never really had real true data on because we were running like a mom and pop. And with the new software technologies and these AIs that are coming out, small businesses can now be run like these big companies because it doesn't cost $500,000 for these softwares anymore. It's $5,000. Like they're within reach now because the pricing of this stuff has come down so low. And then now that you have some of these AI tools that even small businesses can implement, you can actually build out, these programs for you with this software that is doing things that, you would have had to spend $1 million in hardware 10 years ago on, and it's all done through software engineering through AI. And so right now, I think small business has the biggest opportunity for scalability that we've ever had because we finally have some access to things at a cost level that we can afford now that used to only be accessible by Apple and Google and all these giant tech companies that have unlimited budgets. These things are now being able to be held and be done and be sourced by small businesses, and they're just as good as those big programs that people were paying $500,000 for. So I think you're going to see over the next decade a giant resurgence in small business. It is going to explode to levels I don't think we've ever seen.
I 100% agree with you. I'm not at 14 million, but being a small business, small consulting firm, we rely heavily to keep our overhead low on AI. And we're not relying on it to do all the work. It's a tool, right? And you can hand a chisel to two people and one person's going to make the David and the other person's going to break the block of brick in half. That's how AI is being derived, but it's here, not going anywhere. And if you can capitalize it and make your clients' lives easier by it, or customers' life easier by it, then you most certainly should be adopting that. And what that does is, to your point, the accessibility of all these various different platforms that were so ridiculously out of reach for somebody like myself now makes a lot more sense. And, there are just so many different ways that you can kind of mitigate cost in order to grow your business through the advent of this age that we're finding ourselves in. And I mean, I don't think that there's always going to have to be a human element in some shape or form, even if, there's cognition and we hit a singularity. And just for the record, I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. I want to make sure that they are listening and that I'm on page. But if that were to happen, I digress. But the whole thing is the faster you can adopt it, and it doesn't matter if you're $1 million, $15 million, or $500 million. You need to be working down that road as quickly as possible because it's just going to make you that much better. It's going to allow you to do those things that much better.
It strengthens the foundation of your business, right?
Sure.
And what AI does, in my mind, AI is singularly this. It is a productivity tool. That's all it is.
Yep.
That's all it is. It's just to help with productivity. That's all it's there for. That's all we're going to use it. I would love to have a 3-hour podcast with you on AI because I don't think that we're ever going to get to what they consider artificial intelligence or sentient beings through programs. I have my reasons why I don't think it'll ever happen, and I'd love to talk to you about it for another time. I really enjoy the aspect of what AI is doing for not only the general population, but for small businesses. I really, really feel that this technology is going to be the catalyst by which we have some of the next Apples of the world and the Googles of the world and things like that. And it's not going to be who you think it is. It's not. These companies probably don't even exist yet. Something's going to happen, and small business is going to just absolutely dominate, I think, in a lot of new spaces because we have the capacity now to get these programs and to get this productivity done at levels that were only accessible with Fortune 500 companies, basically.
Yeah, we talked on a previous episode about how in the near future, there's going to be a possibility of a one-person billion-dollar valuated company.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not far off of it,
No.
It's crazy. And that's about as small of a business as you can go.
Yeah, yeah. And all it's doing is it's just increasing the ability for that person to produce. That's it. That's all it's doing. It's creating more opportunity for him to do other things besides the monotonous tasks that AI can do very, very well.
Let me take it forward from there because it's a great segue into the section of the podcast that we talk about the market edge. You have a very in-depth kind of mindset of the offer that you're bringing to the table to your client. And you are definitely always looking at the data to see the numbers and how the analytical side of things are working. What are you doing right now in order to stay ahead of your competition on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, we're listening, right? We're listening. And that's the key, right? You have to listen to your clients. That's the main thing. You also have to listen to the market, right? One of the things, I had a long conversation with my banker yesterday. He came to my office and we were just talking about the world, right? I think that over the next 10 years, what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing companies, instead of bragging about product profitability, or instead of bragging about how much revenue they make, or instead of I think you're going to start seeing companies brag about how budget oriented they are, how conservative they are, how few dollars they spent to get things done. You know what I mean? I think that is the new age of how companies are going to show that they are edging out their competition by literally lowering their expenses. And here's why, right? The last time the United States government had a balanced budget was in the Clinton era, right? During that time period, do you know that the overall debt, not just for the government, but for all individuals, right, was extremely low? It was extremely low. So credit card debt was at like an all-time low when the government's debt was also at an all-time low. Why is that? Why is that? Well, the reason is because the ether of borrowing money was naturally accepted globally. Right? People were talking about debt as a good thing. Oh, there was all these books about good debt, how to scale your business with debt. We were just talking about debt all the time and about how there's good debt and bad debt and this kind of debt and that kind of debt. And meanwhile, the government just kept going into debt. And guess what? People just kept going into debt. Businesses just kept going into debt. Well, now look what's happening. What's happening in our ether in the world right now? Governments are starting to say, no. We're going to become more conservative. We're going to become more economic. We're going to become this. And what our business is starting to do, they're starting to say the same thing. We're going to become more economical. We're going to become more. So I think the market edge right now is to not necessarily show people how much money or how great or how whatever you are, but it's how budget friendly you are as a company. And I think you're going to start seeing companies start to be like, hey, how can we start saving more money? Instead of just spending and spending and spending for spending's sake, right? We're going to start to see these companies start to really, really start to think about being more economical and saving money because what's happening right now is the government is saying, Doge is out there saying, we're going to save money and we're going to give it back to the people. Right? So if you're a company and you can be like, hey, we're over here, we're trying to save money too. Why? Because we want to give that savings to our client. I think that message, because it's now in the ether, it's now in the world. I think if you can latch onto that message and show your clients that you're doing this for real, I think that'll give you the edge for the next 4 or 5 years, because it's just what the market wants right now globally, right? It's where everyone's brain is at. How can we save? How can we save? How can we save?
It's a value add. I mean, it's a value add to a client. It's a value add to a customer. It's a value add to your employees. If you can lower overhead and still make the same revenue, listen, I didn't major in business, but I know that lower overheads, same revenue equals higher margins.
But you have to think about this. Most of the time, those are internal conversations with your staff. No, you need to start having these external conversations. Post these things on the internet. Post it on your socials. Hey, the reason we just bought this new piece of equipment, because over time it's going to save us 10% on the cost of our product, which over time will lower our pricing. We're going to save this. That way we can put more service people out there and we can service your business better. We are being more economical so we can give you more. And that's exactly what the government's saying, and that's exactly what we as businesses should be telling our clients, because it's in the ether. That's what people are talking about. And that's what we have to do. We have to look at what the market is giving us and then say, how can we take what's in the market, what's in the ether, and use it to our advantage? And that's how you do it.
Listening. Beautiful thing when you take the time to shut up and listen, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about how Lindsey Furniture affects their client. What's your value add? What is your value proposition to your clients?
Yeah, so the problem that we solve is we solve productivity, motivation, and employee retention problems utilizing office furniture design to assist with that. Yeah. So, most companies on their expenses, the people, employees are the highest expense for almost every company. For the vast majority of them, employees are the biggest expense. It is for my company. It is for most of my friends' companies. That's how it is. And so if I can start to gain a little bit of productivity off of those salary numbers, right? So if you have 20 people and each of those people is making $100,000 a year, you're spending $2 million a year on salaries, right? If I can get you 2% productivity increase, I can save you $40,000 a year on productivity with office, 2%, right? And that could be just making sure that a desk is faced the right way. So when they get up to go to the printer, they don't have to walk all the way around the office, right? That's 2%. There's something that simple, right? Just walking to the copier, making sure that it's more in a more centralized location, making sure that your layout is conducive for this type of work. If you have a collaborative work area, you need to make sure that you're buying collaborative style furniture. If you have a work area where people need to be singularly focused on what they're doing, like an engineering firm or something like that, then you need to buy that type of product. If you're not buying that type of product, then you're losing that 2 to 5 to 10% productivity. And if you're doing that on $2 million with a salary, that's a lot of money. And so we solve that problem. We're able to look at it because we're the experts, and we can say, hey, look, we think you should put this here, this here, this here, and this is why. The flow of the space would be better. Your productivity will increase. You'll be able to be more collaborative or singular. However you want to work, we can do that for you. And so that's how we solve that problem. We don't solve the problem of, I've got an empty office that I need furniture for. There's plenty of people that you can do that on Facebook Marketplace. What you call me for is to make sure that once you buy that product, that the people that are working in that space are as productive and economically suited for motivation, productivity, and employee retention. If that office isn't nice and they don't have nice furniture, guess what? If you have that A player and they're sitting at a crappy chair all day in a crappy office, guess what? You're losing that A player. I don't care how you treat them or how much you pay them. They can go get that somewhere else. You've got to make sure that your space is efficient enough and productive enough to keep those people, keep them happy, but you want to make sure that you're not spending all this money on it, right? So you go to a guy like me because I make the product. I'm the manufacturer and I'm going to install it for you. You skip out on 2 different levels, right? In my business, you have a manufacturer, you have a wholesaler, and you have a retailer. I'm the retailer and I'm the manufacturer. So I just cut everybody out and you get one person making money on you. That's it. Me. That's it. The other way, if you buy from one of my competitors, you're allowing 2 or 3 people to make money on you. Which one do you think is going to be more economical for your business?
Sure. Well, and let me just break that down. So basically, you are going to provide the service of actually reviewing their floor plans and understanding how their flow can be optimized. You're going to provide them with a superior product at a lower rate. Your designs are right up there with Steelcase and Herman Miller, and everything that you are putting out there, although it is less expensive, is by no means less quality or less design forward. You're bringing a premium product to the table at a lower cost with a value add of helping these CEOs and execs to understand that the money that they're putting in is not only going to be to replace these desks, there's a benefit to their business behind it in making sure that it's set up properly for them to be more productive.
And so here's the difference. Herman Miller, Steelcase, Knoll, Hayworth, Technion, all those companies, they can do the exact same thing as me. But there's one thing that they can't do. They can't also give you that value. They can't give you the value-oriented product. They're going to sell you a conference table that's $10,000. They're going to sell you a cubicle that's $3,500 in order to get this productivity and motivation and employee retention done. right? What I'm telling you is I can do all of that. We have the capabilities, we have the software programs in order to do it. We have all of the AI driven features that we can run your space through an AI, and it can absolutely economically do all of the layouts for us and everything, which is what Herman Miller does, right? But we can do it with value added products. And the people that sell value added products, my competitors that sell those products, right? They don't have that. They can't do that. And so I give you the abilities that Steelcase and Herman Miller have, but the value of the product, like what a manufacturer would have. We can do both. And that's how we have been so successful. Because once I tell that story, once I tell you the story and you can see it, right? Do you know where Herman Miller is in relation to my building? They are 200 feet across. Do you think that I care that they're that close to me? No. Do you think that they care that I'm that close to them? You better believe it.
And you want to be on that side of the fence.
They hate it. They hate that I can hit a lob wedge from my front door to their front door. It's 100 yards, literally. And
hey, man, you're playing in the wrong game. If you're hitting a 200-yard lob wedge, you need to go to the PGA.
It's not 100 yards, but I hit my lob wedge 100 yards.
Yeah, sure. Fair. No, that's, let's get some takeaways out on the table here. If you leave this podcast today, if you leave this episode and you take away 3 things that are important, think that one of the things is get your foundation right. Understand where you are currently so that you can look to where you're going. Try and figure out what your value add, what your offer to your client, your ICP truly is, so that you know how you can compete against your competition in an effective way. And last but not least, I would say don't be afraid of the data. Don't be afraid of technology. You see somebody who is here that has been in a business that was run well for 30 plus years before he stepped in, but by implementing these new available products and programs, you can take the information that you're receiving and move it in such a different stratosphere that it gives you an additional directive of how you want to move or scale your business. And last but not least, listen to your clients, listen to your employees. Don't always be talking. I think that is such a valuable lesson, Michael. It really is. You know, when our mouths are open, our ears cannot be. And if you're not hearing the underlying issue with both your client and your employees, then you cannot effectively lead. So,
yep. I think those are great. That's perfect. And fail. Just keep failing. You just keep doing it and learn from every one of them. And eventually you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, look how much I learned. Look how much I accomplished. It really is amazing. Just stick to it. Just keep failing. You'll work out.
So what is in your mind, if it's the fail, that's fine. If you could leave your listeners, let me back up there. If you could leave the listeners with one piece of advice, what is it?
One piece of advice. No business is perfect. You almost shouldn't strive for perfection. What you should strive for is just knowing your business. Just be a constant student of your business. I think if you do that, I think if you can just constantly be learning about your business and about better ways to do it, I don't think there's anything that can stop you. Just constantly be a good student of what you do.
Very well said. And something that we all can work on in, life in general. What you're saying is a very philosophical method of going through this crazy thing called life.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
All right. Well, cool.
I had a great time, brother. I really appreciate the invite.
I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you taking the time to give us a little insight into where you're at and where you're headed.
Yeah, it's funny. We've had multiple of these conversations. We've just never recorded them.
Yeah. Well, that's, again, I mean, like we talk like this all the time, and it's like, let's get it. Yeah.
We'll record it.
Yeah.
Use it for content. It works great. Yeah. I love having these conversations. I'd love to jump on again and talk about something else.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. So I'll make sure to have you back here in the future.
Great. Appreciate you, Dustin.
Thank you. Thanks again. All right. Well, that wraps up our insightful conversation with Michael Lindsey. We hope you enjoyed learning about innovations and dedication behind Lindsey's office furniture. And if you're looking to revamp your workspace or are interested in their extensive range of products, visit their website at lindseyfurniture.com. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay tuned for more inspiring episodes. And let me tell you, if you got some value out of this, like and share. Send it to somebody who else may need to hear it. Until the next time, I'm Dustin Weaver, and this has been the Bullseye Breakdown.